The BSides DC 2016 videos are brought to you by clearedjobs.net and cybersecjobs.com, tools for your next career move, and Antietam Technologies, focusing on advanced cyber detection, analysis, and mitigation.
All right, welcome everybody to BSides. My name is Jack Johnson. I'm the manager of the Mark Monitor Security Operations Center, where I've been working since 2004. Started off as a systems engineer, then became technical operations manager. Now I'm the manager, AKA acting director, whatever you want to call it. So the topic of my talk is knowing the enemy, creating a cyber threat attribution program. And I'll just give you a little bit of background. Our security operations center is kind of unique, where we're not like an IDS, IPF type shop. We basically detect, analyze, and mitigate social engineering attacks. Phishing, malware, vishing, etc. Over the course of my 12 years in the SOC, I think we've enforced on over 200,000 unique events. So this is going to be the focus of my topic today. It's a SOC with a social engineering aspect. So prior to joining Mark Monitor, I was in the Navy. I spent 8 years in the Navy as a cryptologist. So it's great that I followed the guy who just spoke. And I was a SIGINT, signals intelligence cryptologist, and what we did was pretty much monitor signal communications of third parties or people that we were interested in. And I had a specific specialty in Morse code, which you see here. After attending school in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, where I learned Morse code, and that Worcester is spelled Worcestershire, I went to my first duty station. And when you get to your first duty station in the Navy, all the old school guys who are there, they give you all these sea stories about how interesting the job is and how you'll come in and work your 12-hour or 8-hour shift every day. And you're on this end receiving and recording. And on the other end, there's a foreign adversary that's transmitting. And when you do the job every day and you work the same schedule as this person, and what happens over time is that you basically create a persona in your mind of this person. And Morse code has a rhythm to it. And that's part of what makes you successful as a Morse code operator, is that once you adjust to someone's rhythm, I could pretty much copy their code and have this conversation with you at the same time, because your, subconscious mind kind of takes over. But then they also try to make it more exciting and tell you these stories like, you could tell if the guy's had a bad day, if he was drunk before, if he had an argument with his wife, because he'll be distracted and his code will be off. I'm going to bring this in to the modern cybersecurity world. And I like this quote because this quote kind of took me back to my military days of copying Morse code, and also into the work that we do in the Mark Monitor Security Operations Center. If you know yourself and you know your enemy, if you know your enemy, you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles, because you can pretty much anticipate what they're going to do. What we deal with is phishing. And I say we did over 200,000 enforcements, but the first thing I always ask a new analyst, I always ask them, what's a fish? And the answer is that you are the fish. Phishers and social engineer attackers are after the information that you possess, point blank. The methods that they use to obtain that information varies depending on their attack pattern. They involve different kind of phishing lures to trap the victim or trick them into divulging the information. The common lures today, you have URLs, PDF files that contain macros that install malware, Word documents. Everyone knows about Adobe Flash. More recently, JavaScript has been involved with the Locky and other ransomware families, PowerPoint presentations that enable macros, zip files, and just even more substantial damage is done by text files or text communications, which I'm going to speak to a little bit moving forward. So politicians are targeted this year. Email in this election is just the big hot topic, right? Everybody's talking about everybody's emails getting hacked. This was the email URL that was sent to the Democratic bigwig guy that got his Gmail compromised. And I don't know how well you can see it, but it was a bit.ly obfuscated URL that was sent. And if you look at the timeline on the bottom, there was only 2 clicks on this URL. the shortening link. So this means that this was a very targeted attack. They did their operational intelligence on this guy, figured out his email communication patterns, sent him a link. He clicked on it. They got his credentials, logged into his email, and he was exposed. But these type of very targeted attacks are very common. Here's another, recent headline where a cable company, they lost 40 million euros off of email communication that contained nothing but text, meaning that a threat actor, after learning the communication habits of the CFO, sent them a very convincing email, which led them to authorize wire transfer for 40 million euros. This always kind of freaks me out because if you sent me an email to ask me for $1,000, I would probably call you on the phone and ask, what do you need it for? But apparently in these type of large organizations and large banking, it's common practice. I've given this presentation many times with a financial audience, and they said it's just par for the course that millions and billions of dollars are just flying around. So the cyber threat landscape has really evolved since I began working in the SOC. Predominantly in the past, what we would see is that the social engineering attacks were very brand specific, meaning they would say, dear bank user of this type of bank, update your account, or dear subscriber to this service, etc. We saw a shift around 2014 where they started pivoting based on our behaviors, meaning today, most of your social networking sites, you don't log in with an account that belongs to the social networking site. You authenticate with an email account of your personal choice and a password of your personal choice. So this goes for, Facebook, Twitter, etc., Amazon. So the social engineers, being very smart and persistent, they realize that if they obtain your email credentials, that's the keys to the kingdom to everything you have. In 2014, we detected 8 Dropbox sites. And you can see by 2015, it had went over to 50,000. And 2016, these numbers are pulled from this week, over 100,000. But if you look at Google, and this comprises the whole Google family. This is your Gmail, Google Docs, Google whatever, you have it. It's over 350,000. And this, we still have 2 months left. It's really grown tremendously. And the politician's email it was a Gmail account that got compromised. So the numbers are really growing. And what I want to emphasize about this slide is that anyone who's doing incident response, detection, or prevention, you have to look beyond your organization. So if you work for company XYZ, it's not sufficient to just look for threats that have dear XYZ member. You really have to look at your consumer base or employees and look at all the information that they have and all the authentication and communication methods that they have, and try to get a hold of all the attacks that are coming in through those different vectors. Because their work email might be secure, but many users check their social media accounts and personal email at work, and they often reuse the same passwords. There you have, a flaw in the system. So the way that we detect hundreds of thousands, even millions of phishing attacks is that we have internal data sources from our customer base as well as our own internal, and these are weblog refers, you have user submissions, you have network sensors, AV, your AV logs, email bounce backs, because social engineers attacks, many times they'll have a distro list that's kind of old, and what they'll do is they'll email the list, and many of the users on the list have moved on and the messages will bounce. So it's very important for IT email administrators to kind of pay attention to those type of small, little innocuous details that might just bypass them normally, but there's a reason. External data sources are very important. When we first started, stood up the SOC, the challenge that we had was how were we going to detect social engineering attacks? So many of our competitors, they would crawl the web. But what we decided to do was kind of flip the logic and partner with large email providers and just taking their spam feeds. So we would have the major email providers that you know today that offer free email services, partnership with them. They would send us millions and millions of URLs. We would run them through an analysis system, and then we would extract the phishing URLs. Today, because of the problem has grown so much, there's a lot more of, open source intelligence feeds. You have non-government organizations such as the APWG, MOG, etc. You have vendors that do email security or other type of security that will actually sell you feeds for a fee. So it's very important to try to expand your footprint as large as possible so that you can have the widest net to catch all these social engineering attacks. And also, it's very important to be active in the InfoSec community as well as your constituents. Because what we notice is that threat actors, they don't just target one organization. What you'll find is that you'll be part of a group of organizations that are being attacked simultaneously with your organization. So, a lot of SOCs, they use a SIEM, and they have all these different tools that are submitting information. But what I find when speaking to the analysts, that there's so much information overload that they can't make sense of it. So what we do, we don't use this methodology. We actually extract the information, categorize it, and then we process it in a different way so that we can, take it from being raw data to just simple information to intelligence. Because in my mind, intelligence is the story behind what's going on. So, the end result after all this processing is that we extract the artifacts and we look through the emails. We also do smishing attacks that are using voice over IP, the JavaScript that's in part of the ransomware, domains that are being registered. Domains are very useful to kind of exposing the footprint of the threat actor. Because what we see in the CEO type scams or other scams, they'll register a whole series of domains. And they'll typically register the domain within 24 hours before they launch their attack. So we have a tool called EWS, Early Warning System. And what it does, it monitors your brand's name for lookalike domains. So say I'll use Google. Google with 3 O's would fire off, and we would get the who is record, and then we can then take the registrant and do a reverse on that and see all the other domains that they just recently registered. Then we'll alert everyone that, hey, you might have an attack coming soon. So this is the kind of work that we've been doing to kind of get ahead of the curve. Here's a tip that I'm gonna give everybody in the audience. When you have users that are using like a Microsoft Office type client or any type of client, they'll often forward you an email and say, hey, this is suspicious, can you check it out? The problem when they forward the email is that the headers are overwritten from the original message, and now we just have a copy of their headers. If you hit Control-Alt-F, it will take the message that is selected and pop open another window with it as an attachment. So any user, regardless of their technical sophistication or comfortability or whatever, can do this. Then they can forward you the information, and you can then analyze the headers properly. So I always try to make sure I put this out to the audience. Malicious document analysis. This is definitely something that we find very useful. There's a whole row of my SOC team members and colleagues sitting there. That's why I'm kind of nervous, because they're staring at me. But it's definitely a new art form, and I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Lenny Zeltzer, he's from SANS. He has a good cheat sheet that he put together, and it has all the different tips and tricks for all the different types of documents. So whenever I'm talking to like Intel analysts, I've seen this presentation many times where they say the who, what, when, where, how, and why, and they actually apply that to the threat actor. What we did was kind of reverse the logic again and look at who's being targeted, what's the method that they're being targeted with, when are the messages being received. This is very important because what time the messages are being received will tell you two things. It'll tell you, one, how much operational intel the threat actor has, because if they know your schedule, that every Monday you show up at work at 9 a.m. versus 10 a.m. versus 8 a.m. and you receive this message that has a sense of urgency that looks like it was waiting over the weekend, et cetera, they kind of have some kind of insight into your schedule or the victim's schedule. Where the messages are coming from. It's very important. How are the messages getting through? You know, most organizations have AV, scrubbing their email, all type of spam filters, yet the messages are still coming through because the threat actors have some type of knowledge of how to circumvent the system. And the last thing that I find very, very important to question is what are their intentions? What's the end game? You know, the CFO, he can authorize a wire transfer, but what about an admin? What about someone, a security guard at the front desk? If they're being targeted, the end game for all of those different individuals is totally different. Same goes for if you're a software developer is receiving a lot of social engineering attacks versus a system administrator. These are people that have access to very critical systems. So, you know, you collect all the information. It's very important to conduct analysis. So I'll just roll back to a couple years ago. We were initially, in our business, detection and shutdown time is the two primary metrics that all customers are interested in. How much can you detect, how fast can you detect, and how fast can you shut it down? So, you know, we've been doing this for a while, and customers are never satisfied with status quo. So a lot of smart customers are saying, what else can you do for us? What else can you give me? What else can you give me? So we started digging around, and what we would find is trace evidence that is left behind, such as PhishKit, the domain registrations like I spoke to, the Whois records. And what we started doing was actually picking through all of these different pieces of information, and we would find that this phishing attack would ship the information to this email address, or this type of phishing attack will ship the collected information to an IRC form, or all different kind of, you know, formats. I started off just playing around and put it into a spreadsheet. And what I noticed is that a pattern just popped out, apparent, clear. So then I spoke with another senior analyst that has been working with me for about 10 years. And I was like, check this out. I'm doing X, Y, Z, and this looks very interesting. So we started, you know, just playing around, seeing what we can do, and it was definitely something there. Perfect storm, or the stars aligned properly. I had 2 analysts who changed the shift, so I was working with them directly. We hired an engineer who had a background in gaming, because gamers cheat a lot. So this guy had a very he had a very good mindset of PHP vulnerabilities, and all kind of obfuscation and just crazy things that people do in the gaming world to kind of level themselves up. What we did then was move from a spreadsheet to a database, and then we began automating some of the collection of the information. And we also started doing analysis on sites that the phishers and social engineers were hacking into to see if there was a pattern there. And of course there were. So what we would notice is that certain sites had common vulnerabilities. So WordPress is very popular. They pop those sites all day. And what we would see is that this site would have a cherry plugin, this would have XYZ plugin, and then we would notice that the brands that are being targeted matched up with the different vulnerabilities, and then we started mapping them, and we would say, this is the same person, this is the same person, etc. And the reason why this was very possible is because human beings have behaviors and habits. I like to classify them, just for simply, as like periods of activities, and automation or the lack of automation is a behavior. So we would measure things like, if we take a site offline, how long would it take for it to come back online, or would another site appear? So for instance, if we would see 50 phishing sites come up, and we would take them down. If they were back online in 5 minutes, then the guy is monitoring and automating the deployment, because it's impossible to do that manually. Versus, you know, you take a site down and then 2 days later it comes back up, or it appears somewhere else. Also habits. Whenever you malware binaries, there's text fields inside of them. Also phish kits. So if you look at the raw text, you'll see that there's speech patterns. They'll write things in their native tongue. They'll use grammar mistakes. They'll even just put weird things like 6 spaces. Or I was talking to someone else, they told me that they had a guy, he would just finish everything with 6 slashes or 5 slashes or something like that. And these are all subconscious decisions that people make. Just like if you ever watch the Poker Wars, they all wear these weird disguises and do strange things because we all have a tail. And what they try to do is obfuscate their tail by just behaving oddly because it's human nature. So we just apply the same concept to attributing attacks to certain threat actors. Humans also have limitations. And I divided these into 2. One is resources. Financial and operational intel, it limits their scope and ability. Today, being a hacker has become very simple and you don't have to have technical ability. And the reason for this is there's commercial off-the-shelf services that provide you with remote access Trojans, exploit kits, etc. They're all just pay-for-play services. But the personal limitations or skill sets, it's impossible if everyone in here is technical in some way, shape, or form. And we know you just cannot go from being interested in programming to an elite programmer in 6 months. I don't care how many online MOOCs you do. It's just impossible. Also, we're limited by our imagination. Certain information in one person's hands is much more lethal in someone else's hands based on their level of imagination. And I also find this true when you're working with your analysts. And then lastly, social. Their social circles will help them level up very quickly if they meet the right person. And this is true in any type of interaction with people. So this is another aspect that we have to, consider when we're doing our attribution. So these are a list of some resources, and I kind of divided them from most severe to least severe. So if your organization or someone that you're working for is being targeted by exploit kits or RAS, MAS, PAS, which is ransomware as a service, malware as a service, phishing as a service, or even you're seeing BGP hijacking, this is very sophisticated elite status. Exploit kits and ransomware as a service and all these services are very expensive. They can range from $10,000 a month to we've seen, $50,000 for a quarter because the return on investment is so high and the criminals that are supplying the service control the entire infrastructure, so it makes the mitigation process extremely difficult. The middle tier is criminally owned where you'll have bulletproof hosting, which is where they'll set up their infrastructure overseas. And it's not really, bulletproof hosting is kind of like a misnomer, a myth. It's not really bulletproof hosting. It's that the country where the hosting provider resides in has very loose laws, and the hosting provider themselves has a very loose term of service. So their customer base, it's for the criminal audience, but when law enforcement or anyone contacts them, they're saying they're not breaking the law because this is within their terms of service, so they don't have to take action. And also they may own the IP space. Criminal abuse, this is what you'll see very popular, where they'll crack sites, they'll register sites or install malware binaries on free hosting sites, or they'll just abuse terms of service. So last year, there was a company that allowed free domain registrations for 30 days, and it just went crazy. They're a subsidiary of 2 Cows. And it was just out of control. It was so bad that ICANN and everyone petitioned them to just stop the service. So here we go with strategic partnerships. I use this slide. This is from the movie Blow, where Johnny Depp, he was a marijuana trafficker, and he ended up getting caught with 500 pounds of marijuana, and he went to prison. So while he was in prison, he met this guy, Diego. And Diego told him that he has a very good vision. He just has the wrong vision. Instead of transporting marijuana, he should get into the cocaine business because it's much more profitable, yada, yada, yada. He ended up working for Pablo Escobar. This applies to our cyber threat actors. They're in these IRC groups, underground forums, dark web, etc. They can be very successful at one type of attack, where they can have a friend or associate that they meet that doesn't have the skill set or the knowledge to pour out the attack, but they have the vision. They combine, and next you'll see your threat actor that you've been tracking for 3 years, he'll just level up, and you'll be like, wow, I've never seen him doing all this kind of strange stuff. You know, he became way more sophisticated, and it's a definitely, you know, an indication that he's been talking to someone. Now I'm going to flip that coin. In the InfoSec cybersecurity world, we have to do the same thing. There's definitely strength in number and strength in sharing. The open source intelligence feeds, et cetera, you know, they have MISP, the malware information sharing platforms, et cetera. We all have to join together and start sharing and discussing these things as much as possible, as much as you can, to kind of make the community stronger, because our adversaries are definitely doing it. So I work with law enforcement, you know, on the federal level, local level, et cetera. And one thing that we have to maintain a chain of evidence. So there's not really much guidance. I try to look for guidance before coming here today, and I posted things and I sent a lot of emails, and they're like, I had people who testify at a lot of trials, and they're saying basically what you have to do is MD5 everything that you obtain, maintain a chain of custody, and also journal your activities. What were you doing when you came across this? How did you do it? Why did you do it? Et cetera. Because if you become part of a case and you go on the stand, they're going to cross-examine you and ask you all this information. They also suggested that in the course of your analysis, you might have to modify files, such as if you have a zip file, you have to unzip it to see the contents. Once you unzip that file, you also have to MD5 all those subsequent files, et cetera. A newer way that people are doing, and it's, I guess, fancy, slick, they're using the blockchain to verify integrity. So there's if you Google blockchain to authenticate documents, et cetera, you'll find a bunch of articles. People are doing it. I just started seeing it in like the last couple months. It's very important to maintain and, you know, collect all this information for the purpose of stopping the bad guys. And the only way you can really stop them permanently is to take them offline. There was a time where the Nigerian hackers had free reign to just do whatever they want. Contact everybody with romance scams, BEC scams, 419 scams, which actually comes from a section of their legal code. The time is no more. And I wanted to share this with the audience. They caught a whole ring of Nigerian scammers, and they took the guy, they arrested him, and, you know, they had profited upwards of $60 million. So times are definitely changing. This is from August the 1st. To bring all of this together and to have it really work, after we did our initial research and, you know, prototyping, we really had to go to our upper management, all the way up to the CEO, to get authorization to continue. We had to speak to our legal counsel to understand, to explain to them what we were doing, and also get feedback on boundaries and lines that we should not cross. Because once you get into this type of stuff, the rabbit hole goes really, really deep. You have to bring in the managers of the different departments within your organization or whoever you're working with. And then you have to work with the IT, network, and security people, because they maintain the resources that we all use, and you have to have them play ball with you or you will not get anywhere. To make this type of program work, first you need permission, like I just spoke to. You have to develop protocols. So users have to know what to do, what to do and who to send the information to. This is often confusing in many organizations, where someone will say, you'll speak to users and they'll say, yeah, I receive these strange messages all the time. And you'll say, what do you do with this? Like, I don't open them. Like, all right, good, you don't open them. What do you do? I delete them. This is helping our adversaries stay in stealth mode, because we have no idea the breadth of their attacks. You need procedures, processes, and you bring it all together, you create a program. My goal is to have all of my users, all of my customers feed as much information, anything they think is suspicious, send it. We'll take a look at it and process it and let you know. And also part of that is feedback. Without the feedback, the users, they feel like they're just sending the information into a black hole. And this is from, you know, my personal interaction and speaking with them. So you want to enlist as many human sensors as possible because we have tons of users. They're all using different apps and services and chat forums and more things than you can think of. And they're receiving malicious content on all of these services. So you have to connect the dots. For instance, we know there's people who create fake LinkedIn profiles and then send friend requests to all of your, my SOC employees. Or we have HR, they receive job applications or resumes with macro viruses, macro enabled malware attachments. You have to collect all of this to really address your, threat landscape. And the cool thing is that a human being is much more intelligent than any machine learning or AI algorithm at quickly discerning patterns. As humans, we can look at and identify patterns really quickly. So by bringing everyone into the fold and, with the overall goal of trying to collect this information, you can really, really get a good insight into your attack threshold. This picture right here, I wanted to bring this in because most IT people or security people are introverts. I'm an extrovert, so I don't have a problem with talking with people. However, most end users look like my son Adam when they're coming to a security person to tell them about something suspicious. They feel like he's gonna just chop them in half with a lightsaber or just dismiss them. We really have to build bridges with our end users and non-techie people. For instance, I'm all for, brown bag lunches where you invite someone from a different department, someone from the payroll accounting department, someone from the admin department, because only by sharing information and making them feel comfortable with the topic will they begin to understand that we're all part of the same team with the same overarching goal. We have to make ourselves accessible. I mean, myself included, I manage the SOC. If I call a network engineer, the first thing they tell me is the network is fine, or it's not their fault, or the security guys, he didn't do it, or he installed this. And I'm like, dude, I'm not accusing you or something. I'm trying to tell you I need your help. So I'm a manager, I've been doing this forever. I can't imagine someone who barely, has a good concept of Microsoft Word coming to tell you like, I opened this document and I think something weird is going on. Most of the time they won't say anything because everyone's afraid of Darth Maul. All right, any questions? Go ahead.
In your topic talk, you're talking about actual attribution. How are you actually affecting attribution by the metrics that you're gathering, especially if it's from, let's say, a place that has loose logs?
I'm glad you asked that question because I kind of felt like I went through too quick. So my focus of my top is not really I don't care what their name is. I want to know what they're doing and how they do it. Because the faster I understand their attack pattern, we can mitigate quickly. I'm going to go into a little story. I wanted to save time so I can talk about your thing. So we just recently had a very, very good example of what you can do with this. So we have a guy, he's been phishing multiple customers for years, right? He uses certain emails to collect the phishing form, drop sites, collection point. So we enumerated a bunch of them. He was what kind of sites did he pop? WordPress. He popped these WordPress sites. So we were, through investigation, able to get access to the files that he left behind on the server. One of these files contained a list of SMTP servers with username and passwords. Those passwords link directly to his personal email accounts. See how that works? So not only do we know his whole IT, criminal infrastructure, we actually know his personal email accounts. And, we work with an investigative firm. They were able to log in and see all the transactions that he's been performing. He actually sells all the collected credentials for Bitcoin. So that's the type of mitigation you can, step your level up. Instead of like the whack-a-mole aspect of just shutting down sites, what we want to do is take them offline. And we've actually worked with law enforcement in South America where we attributed an individual and he was prosecuted. That was twice in South America. We have a bunch of Nigerian cases going on. So I wasn't going to I glanced over it. So I'm glad you asked that question. So that's where I'm going. It's not really putting a face on a person or a name. That's great if you can get to that. But more than likely, because of the laws of their country, you won't be able to perform an arrest. But you can take them offline. And if you make yourself and your organization a hard target, they'll move on to an easier target, just like a bully. A bully doesn't want anyone that's going to fight back or stand up to them.
So once you identify a hand and you're giving it a name like you see with the CP number or common virus naming number, attributes, have you any visions of how you want to share that between organizations saying, okay, I'm seeing this particular hand involved with me and this is what they're doing, and kind of like, again, the concepts that we see with NIST and NBD.
So, yes, we've done a lot of that. So I'll give you an instance. I was at a conference. There was a guy, he came up, he's like, I was looking for you. So I'm like, okay, who are you? He's like, I'm from this bank, XYZ, and I see you guys are being attacked by the same people that are attacking us. So we spoke and we just set up a data exchange. And this guy gave us so much insight into their operation that we really stepped our game up. Our learning curve went from here to there. So he actually shared techniques of how he was able to detect when they come online super fast. We incorporated that into our SOC and benefited everyone. And also there was 2 other organizations that we had relationships with that we brought into the fold and created, a SIG, a special interest group, real quick with an email thread. And we automated the process of sharing all the detections amongst them. We work with registrars. So like a registrar that owns a CCTLD, country code registrar that they put out, it's like .com, but shorter. And what we do is we send them the false registrations or the lookalike domains for their, CCTLD, and they just take them offline immediately. So this is what our goal is the incident response portion, to shorten that window that they have to perform their illegal activity.
How much do you use link analysis like Maltego or IBM analysis or Talent?
So we do use we don't use those. I have a Maltego account that I use. Sorry about that. But we have an automated system and a proprietary database that we built because our detections are so large that it would be difficult to graphically visualize everything. But once we find something of interest, then we'll pop it into Maltego to take a closer look at it. Because on a day, I think we detect over 1,500 unique phishing cases a day, and we process probably 3 million URLs a day. 30 million? 15 million URLs a day. That's my engineer. He's going to keep me honest today, because I'll just say like 300 million. But yeah, 30 million URLs. So it gets really difficult at that level to start trying to, bring everything in. So that's why our goal is to bring everything in, normalize it into a database, and then perform the analysis. That's what I was alluding to in the scene image with the basketball, because you can become overwhelmed with the information. Any other questions? Go ahead.
You talked about the same aspect and the fact of, so let me rephrase. What is the relationship with you using custom tools and the SIM application for these types of operations?
So the relationship, I'm glad you asked that. It's about your end game. I look at this as, we're like a crime scene investigator, right? So if you come into a crime scene, you have the lead detective, he goes through and he's like, yeah, bag it and tag it, get some prints, I want you to dust, I want you to get this forensics team. One person cannot be all things. So for instance, if, I'll ship, I gotta stop doing that. I'll ship the URL attachments off, the malicious attachments to one of my malware engineers immediately. Where, I'll have one of my pen test analysts take a look at the site. I'll ship something else off to someone else. I'll have someone who has language skills take a look at this and translate. So this is why we use custom platforms, because there's no commercial, software that will do what we're doing, because our SOC is unique where we're externally to the firewall. We don't monitor anything inside the firewall. We're out, you know, if this was a fortress, we're outside with the bad guys taking them out before they can get into the fort. That's the difference between our SOC and a traditional SOC. I like questions. Give me another question. Go ahead.
Do you recommend protecting your personal brand?
To protect your personal brand, I don't want to be a sales pitchy, but you really need to monitor your internet persona. Meaning you have to know your domains and your domain names. You have to know your affiliates. That's very important because a lot of malicious activity can enter your network through your third parties as well. You have to be aware if they receive a breach or if they have some type of vulnerability going on, you know, your affiliates. But it's just being aware. You have to monitor for your domain names. You know, make sure that all your employees have their safe browsing APIs enabled in their browsers. This is very simple. Our company, we're one of the primary suppliers of phishing and malware URLs to Google and Microsoft for the safe browsing APIs. So it's just, you know, in education. Well, that's it. So if anybody's interested and you have any questions that you come up with later, you can email me or send me, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll respond. And if people always ask me for the slides, I don't think slides have context without the talk, but I'll send you a PDF version if you want them. That's it. Thank you.